welcome to the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast. My name is Nina Sunday. I'm your host, and I'm so excited to speak with our industrial philosopher, Cristina DiGiacomo, who combines 20 years of management experience in large corporations and 10 years of practice in philosophy, and with a master's of science degree in organizational change management. She teaches leaders and their teams philosophy so they can be wiser at work. Author of the book Wise Up at Work. Welcome, Cristina.
Hi, Nina, and hello, everyone out there. I'm happy to be here.
I'm so excited. When I met you over Zoom, I just went, I can't wait to have you on the program, because I have to share with you, when I was 25, I made the conscious decision that I wanted to seek wisdom in life. And it became a no-brainer when I was writing my book on soft skills that I called it Workplace Wisdom. So for me, I'm very happy to talk to someone that poses that wisdom is something that managers and their teams can aspire to. Is that how you view it?
Absolutely.
Tell us about the award that you won for being an industrial philosopher.
Oh, sure. So the International Association of Top Professionals uh, is a group that it's a membership group, but you have to be invited to it. And I wasn't a member, and I was contacted by them, and they thought that what I did was very, very interesting. And they said, we'd like to actually give you an award for being an industrial philosopher, and give you this Industrial Philosopher of the Year award. And it's very prestigious. So it felt really great to be honored by them, especially since I wasn't a member or anything like that. And what I really appreciate about what they're doing and with this award is it's really recognizing that philosophy is starting to has a place. And I think there's a renaissance going on right now with philosophy, and people are beginning to come back to it. I believe that wisdom is actually the ultimate skill. If you think about all the things that we either want to be or want our employees to be: adaptable, resilient, collaborative, creative, innovative, good listeners, high EQ. I think we're at, somewhere along the lines of 20 to 25 different soft skills that can be evaluated. And if you've ever met a wise person, they are all those things.
On Maslow's scale hierarchy, they've reached self-actualization and probably beyond, transcended that.
Exactly. And so for me, it's, why don't we focus on learning how to be wise? Let's just ladder up to that, because when you do that, everything else that you would desire in yourself as a leader or as a manager, and desire for your teams to embody, will naturally sort of come out of that.
Well, of course, if you think about the wisdom of Solomon, having to judge between two mothers who were fighting over the custody of a child, that requires incredible integrity to bring to decision making. In fact, one of our earlier podcasts is Stu Brody and the power of integrity, because it takes a wise person to understand what is the highest position to take in any dilemma or situation. Is that right?
Absolutely. When you and there's a whole process to this, but if you think about also Aristotle's virtues, magnanimity, generosity, wit, friendliness, all of those things, are all tied to being a wise person. And what it means to be wise in any given situation is to be able to pull all of these things together and be able to judge a situation appropriately and have the correct way of thinking about it, being able to know when you need to react, but also know that reacting may not be the solution, and also knowing how to act. So, being wise isn't just about thinking. It's also this process of what is the right thing to do? How do I do that? What's the best for everyone involved? And pulling in all these other aspects. And it's a practice. You have to, first of all, desire to want to be this way, but use it and apply it in your day-to-day situations so that it becomes automatic.
So does that suggest a manager could be reading some classical philosophical works? And if so, which authors?
I highly recommend, yes. So yes, I always encourage people to read the original texts. And the reason for that is there's something that happens in the mind when you're reading these words from their original intention. There's a power to them. There's something that is challenging for your comprehension. It really kind of stirs things up. There's a difference between hearing Emerson say, insist on yourself, never imitate, versus someone saying to you, just be authentic.
Yeah, there's the modern translation, and then there's the original, classical expression of these ideas, and they kind of reach a different part of the brain. We've got these little back areas of the brain, because I know sometimes I'll be reading a book and I'll go, oh, it's like a feather duster to a part of my brain that I forgot I had.
Yes, Nina, what an unbelievable way to put it. And what happens is there's all these other things, amazing things that get triggered, your creativity, the language, there's just something about it. And so I encourage managers or people to start with the Enchiridion from Epictetus,
Okay, well, I even
who's,
haven't heard of that. I'm ashamed to say,
that's
um,
okay.
but we'll put it in the show notes.
Do you know who Epictetus is?
Well, I studied ancient history, but I don't. I know Cicero and Marcus
Okay.
Aurelius and all people like that. So please elaborate.
Oh, yes. So I love Epictetus. He is from the Stoic school. And what I love about him is he has a backstory. He was a slave. And so he started life out being someone's property. And also his master uh, broke his leg. And so he was also lame. And eventually, what happened was he began to start to try and learn philosophy and became a student. And his master was so uh, heartened by his passion for wanting to learn these things that his master ended up putting him in philosophy school and helping him get educated, and then eventually freed him. And why I like Epictetus is he's so incredibly accessible. And the Enchiridion, and I'll give you the spelling of that for the notes,
Yes.
is really the best of his passages. He was the one who said, it's not what happens to us that affects us, but what we think about what happens to us
And
that
that is such a
affects us.
common saying that people say, and now we're actually attributing it to the original author, who
Yes,
deserves to be have that attribution. Excellent.
yes.
I like
Well, there's another one that he had. If you had any sort of elementary school teacher, kind of, you know, I know I got this, but he also said we have 2 ears and one mouth. 2 ears to listen and one mouth to, that expression for, and so he was the one who said that. So thank you,
Well,
sixth
that's
grade.
very accessible, and he deserves to be better known. Thank you for pointing that out. Excellent. And who else? Who else would help managers be better leaders? Like, is it Aristotle or is it another author? Is it Socrates, The Art of Asking Questions?
So I am a huge fan of Socrates. He is my stage dad. Just saying, I lean on Socrates a lot when I'm actually working with clients, because I use the dialectic, the Socratic method, in working with clients, and also teach it. So, but I think if there's someone who wants to kind of step into this on their own, I also recommend James Allen's As a Man Thinketh.
Oh, yes, I've got that.
Yes, yes. I mean, to me, James Allen is like the Stephen Covey of philosophers. Very,
Well,
very.
yes. Now are we sort of getting into the Napoleon Hill uh, era, like the early 20th century? Is that where he comes
That's
from?
that's fair. I'm just looking at the what I consider good gateway literature for managers. So, but in terms of more ancient ideas, Plato's laws is really his sort of prototype of what makes a good society. I extrapolate from Plato's laws and teach on how his ideas make a great organization, and what he had offered in terms of what is a good ruler for a society are also really incredible ideas for leadership and managers to embody.
Well, let's unpack that a little bit,
Sure.
Christina. Tell us a little bit more about Plato's ideas that help a manager be better with leading teams. That'd be great.
Absolutely. So, one of the things that Plato talked about is certain roles and responsibilities of the leader or the ruler. One of those responsibilities is to be that of the educator. So the idea is, as a ruler, your responsibility is to make sure that everyone understands what's going on, not only with what you are putting down as a policy or a rule. You explain yourself, and you enable them to and empower them to understand the laws that they are ruled by. So now, if you look at this from a manager's perspective, a lot of times managers come out with, okay, we have to do this, we have to do that, you need to do this, we're going to reorg, we're going to do this, moving things around. And typically they don't really explain or spend time explaining the rationale behind that change. Or even if it's something individual where they're giving individual feedback, it's, well, you did this, you did that, and they don't really spend the time to educate on their rationale for that feedback, or perhaps even engage in a dialogue. This is where Socrates can come in, a dialogue as to what may have been the underlying cause needed for that feedback or that conversation. So go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, um, because is one of the most powerful words in the English language. And to give an instruction without a reason almost opens yourself up to resistance and people muttering under their breath and doing it without full commitment. So if you really want ownership, you give people a reason. But even bigger than that, as a change practitioner, which I am, you need to ask people questions and get their suggestions, because what if they actually have a really valid point? They're at the coalface. You know, they're not dumb. You've hired them for a reason. You've hired smart people, hopefully. Well, why not get their opinion? And when they offer their opinion, if it resonates, acknowledge that. You'll get much more ownership, is my understanding. So you're saying Plato, he talks about the need to educate the people that you lead. Is that what I'm hearing?
That's correct, which you at the time was totally radical because we're talking about a period of time where rulers were just tyrants mostly. There
And
were
there were
very
slaves,
yeah, there were very few benevolent kings or benevolent
despots,
queens. Very,
benevolent
they were
despots.
mostly tyrants.
Right.
And,
Mm.
also Plato had 10 years being held hostage by a tyrant in Sicily. And so he wrote the laws after he was sort of allowed to leave by this tyrant. And for him, the educator takes the dominance out of the dynamic
Yeah.
and makes it a role of the teacher, of the engager, the role where it feels slightly more on an equal playing field.
Well, an earlier episode with Jeffrey Hazlitt, he was talking about the role of a leader is to bring out the capability of the people they lead. Well, you can't bring out their capability unless you're educating them, unless you're inviting them to express their opinion. So, and also for you to rise up in the organization, you have to train the people behind you to take your place. You know, you assume that you are actually going to be promoted to another role, higher, better value role. So you've got to educate your people, or they won't let you go because they go, well, we've renewed that person in that place, so we'll just keep that person there. So
Yeah.
it's you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not bringing out the capability of the people behind you. So very interesting what Plato has to say.
And one more thing,
Keep going.
this has implications in other ways too. Plato believed in transparency. He believed, he believed that the ruled could question the ruler or the lawgiver. And actually the ruler had to answer those questions. So think about this idea of the educator when it comes to organizational transparency, and when it comes to, a CEO having to address in a town hall, like the level of presence or the sort of, persona that comes with being the educator. So there's so many different facets to this and nuances that I feel like it could really branch out just even with this one thing.
And Plato was Greek, correct?
Correct.
Along with Aristotle and Socrates.
Correct.
Um, well, here's the thing. Greece was the home of democracy. And one of the tenets of democracy is public transparency, and that leaders do have to be benevolent and also listen to their people. So it seems to me that there could be a lot to be learned by reading the classic Greek philosophers. Yeah. So what is the dynamic of how teams work? What's your understanding of that?
So I was thinking about this, also from the perspective of the fact that I've been on teams and what that felt like, and looking at it from more of an insider point of view. And the it's kind of a large question, but I can tell you, yeah, I mean,
How long
what's
is a piece of string?
right, like what's the dynamic of a good team versus what's the dynamic of a bad team, what's the dynamic of a small team versus a large team. So, the one thing that I will say that I think a lot of managers miss is, and this comes from Vedic philosophy, Indian philosophy, which the idea is the group is the most important unit.
Well, absolutely. If you read Buckminster Fuller, who was a philosopher from last century, he actually coined the term synergy, which is a
Mm-hmm.
combination of synthesis and energy. And he said the sum of the whole is greater than its parts.
Hmm.
When you put a group together, they come up with more elegant solutions than individuals working alone. So, we can see in different centuries, different philosophers there to guide the human spirit, the human imagination. So, if you're not reading them, you're missing out.
Yeah. Well, what I love about the group is the most important unit
Mm,
is because it actually creates um, something cohesive and unified from, you know, different elements or different people. And so when you look at the group as a whole and make decisions knowing or understanding that the most important thing is the group, whether it's the health of the group, the collaboration of the group, the functioning of the group, and so many other things that enable teams to be able to be effective and innovative. A lot of times there's a focus on thinking that the individual people are the different units that are the most important.
right.
And a lot of times, and I think that's what managers miss, because I mean, and the reality is to always, they're stuck dealing with the squeaky wheel, or they're the person who's not pulling their weight, or the person who, and so that's where the unit or the group can get fragmented. So I'm suggesting that a manager always thinks that the group is the most important unit, and even bringing in utilitarianism, which is making decisions that benefit the whole group versus just one individual.
And what I'm hearing is there's this game whack-a-mole, right? You focus on one thing and something else pops up. It seems to me that maybe if you have got a toxic person or an unproductive person, you could delegate to a coach to deal with them, because you really need to be focused on the people that are doing their job, doing a good job. Because if you don't focus on them equally, it's a bit like having two children. You have the parent spends time with the problematic child, and they forget the good child, and the good child can easily go off track because they're starting to feel resentful that they're not getting enough attention. So everybody needs equal attention. We have to be good parents as managers, really. Fascinating areas that we're going into. Now, I know in your book, Wise Up at Work, you share stories how wisdom is used to motivate people in the workplace and to elevate the workplace. Have you got a story you can share?
So I think one of my favorite experiences was with someone who was a chief strategy officer who worked with me, and we did some practices around perception and truth and reality. And he had an employee that he had to have a challenging conversation. She was very challenging for him, and they didn't always. There was tension and friction, nothing terrible, but he just felt like she was always kind of difficult, and he had to have a conversation with her. I believe it was actually her performance review, and he was a bit nervous about it. He was a bit like, I have to give her this kind of feedback, or I have to have this conversation with her, and she's always quite challenging, and I'm, concerned about that. So I thought about a practice related to truth, and I said to him, see her as if for the first time. And I said, forget about everything that's happened in the past and any narrative or story that you have about her, or what she's done or what she said or anything, and just meet the moment and meet her and see it as if for the very first time, as if none of this has happened. See what's in front of you. And he did. And one of the things he realized was how much he assumed and expected her to act a certain way every single time. Because he came back to me, he's like, when you said that to me, I realized I'm always like, oh, she's going to act this way. Or I know she's going to react like this, or I know she's going to say something like this. I know her. And
Oh,
he's like, and when I practiced that, I realized I could walk into this situation with completely fresh perspective, fresh eyes, and pretend that I'm meeting her for the first time. So that's how he conducted the conversation
oh, that is so
without,
profound.
and he said it was one of the most productive and positive and not at all like their previous conversations in the past. He felt a completely different dynamic and energy when he brought that mindset into that conversation with his employee.
It seems to
So
me that's a filter we could use in life with our spouse, with our children, with our friends. It's absolutely profound. I love that. I love that reframing that you suggested. And of course, your work is leading us down that path because just that conversation with you today is inspiring me to pick up and read some of these philosophers again, which I have in the course of my life, because in previous conversations we've talked about the value of reading Emerson.
Emerson, another one, he just sets my mind on fire,
That-
as he says. Oh, he's amazing.
And of
Highly
course,
recommend, if there's any, if someone who has not read Emerson, highly recommend Self-Reliance. Just as a
self-reliance, yeah, that's the
self,
one.
yeah.
That's the one. In fact, I've just downloaded it as an audio book so I can read it, listen to it while I'm doing chores around the house. That's the beautiful thing about audiobooks. If you're doing physical stuff that doesn't require, typing or being at your desk, yeah, you can still be listening. So, and that's the value of a podcast as well, too. You can still be listening. I think we've you've edified me. I hope you're edifying my audience as well, my listeners. So it's I'm sad to say it's pretty well the end of our time talking today, but I've thoroughly enjoyed talking with you, and I really appreciate you making the time, Cristina. We've been speaking with Cristina DiGiacomo, uh, an industrial philosopher, author of Wise Up at Work. This is the Manage Self, Lead Others podcast. Listen to it wherever your favorite podcasts you can access. And remember to subscribe, give us a rating and a comment, and we'll see you next time. Ciao for now.